Record. Okay, so hello and welcome. This is another part of a series of Star Teaching stories that are being shared. And we've been meeting on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern to hear stories of the Star Teachings from David Ouillette Sanipass. Tonight, we have a different guest. I just wanted to share that David will not be joining us this evening. Earlier this week, he had some sad news that he has lost one of his friends, and that friend was a big part of the Star Teachings and those stories. So he's going to be taking tonight off to have some time. So we have an amazing teacher with us here from North Carolina, and together we are going to share some of the stories of the Star Teachings in more recent years, starting in about 2012. So my name is Jaclyn Ouillette, and I am one of the teachers in the Star Teachings, and also always a student. There's never stops, so we're always learning. And I will give a kind of a brief introduction of how the teas came to be, and then I'll turn it over to our guest Teana, and then we'll go back and forth a little bit and share what we know. So these teachings first came to us in Maine in 2012, and that was like a super exciting time. I came back from Utah all excited. I had been studying, been in Peru, and traveling around the US trying to find these ancient wisdoms and ancient nuggets and looking for, I don't know, like the magical enlightenment. And I had heard that David Ouillette Sanipass would be speaking in Falmouth, Maine, which was really close to where I grew up. And I knew that I had to go there. I had to be there. I had to listen. This was a very rare opportunity to hear these teachings. And for anyone from the north or from any of the native cultures around here to be sharing these spiritual teachings was a very special and precious thing. It's not widely shared. And so I made that commitment. I went to that first teaching. It was an invitation to a tea, and it was called Tea Time. There's 8 people there, and when I went in, I was welcomed by this really amazing community. They had been to a couple speaks before and a couple teas, and this tea, there's just a few people there, but they were so interested in, who I was and what I did, and it felt more welcoming. It had a different quality than any other circle or group that I had ever been to. And so immediately I was just drawn into that, the glow of the community. We had tea, we had s'mores, we had like snacks, and the social part was a really big piece in the teachings. And then David came in and he began sharing his story. And I think before I came to that first tea, I had been looking for, some enlightenment. Like I would just bump into a vibration and then I would be able to like hold it and life would be magical. And I kept looking for that next thing. Like maybe it's on top of that mountain, and maybe it's over here in the jungle, and maybe it's out west in California or Utah. And when I sat down at that first tea, it was like so many light bulbs went off. It was like all these connections being made, and it was just, I don't even know if I could actually put it into words. The energy, the momentum, the excitement, the curiosity that happened in those circles. And we now we have our teas. It's like 2 hours at a time. There's like a beginning and an end, but then it was like you show up at 4 o'clock and we might be there until 1 in the morning getting to know each other. And there were people from all over, different beliefs and different circles. Some are mathematicians and just all different people, and we were able to be together and to be curious of one another and to have fun and to dream. And I think that hope of spirit was really strong, that we were going to be moving into like a whole new world and that we were part of something. So this was so exciting. I went to a few of these teas, and at one of them, there was an announcement that we would be having a speak. And there had been 2 speaks before, I think July and August. And so I came into the teas around August. And this announcement was in October, and the speak was going to be about 2 weeks away. We didn't have much time to plan. We were given the date and the time. And then basically, if we wanted these teachings, we had to set it up. And we had to invite the people to come. So in my flyer making craze, I Googled David on the internet. I found a picture. I probably stole it off Google or something, put it on a flyer, and I printed a stack of flyers like this. And I was going to go invite everyone. He told us to invite everyone, that the more people that would be there, the more of the message that could be shared. And so I got this stack of flyers and I went everywhere to everyone I knew. I handed them out. I invited everybody on Facebook. And I knew this is where Teana comes in. I had met Teana before I had been to teas. I found her in the most randomest way. Maybe not random because nothing is coincidence, but I make jewelry, and in that I was looking for another place to sell my jewelry, and I had this like nudge to look on Craigslist, which is not a place I would normally go, but I go on there, I type something in, Maine artist jewelry, and I found a place. It was a couple of hours from me. I reached out and said, "Hey, my name's Jaclyn, I make jewelry. Would you be interested in looking at my things?" And this message came back: "I'm going to connect you with Chrissy. She's the owner of the shop." And then I set up a time and went up. I think it was Earth Day. And I met the people in the studio. And one of them was Teana. And Teana just had so much vibrant energy. And hey, are you going to stay and hang out? And like, oh, I have a long drive. So I continued selling my jewelry in that shop for a little while, and then that shop actually moved, and it moved closer to where I lived. So I had the opportunity to go there a lot more, and so I had the opportunity to see Teana a lot more. And in that time, that was one of the places where I knew I had to bring those flyers. So I grabbed that stack of flyers. I head up to Bath, Maine. I go into the studio and put a bunch of flyers on the desk, on the counter, and hung some in the window. And it was a crazy kind of energy because we had just had an earthquake. I think it was the day before. And in one of the teas, we were asked, what kind of sign would we need to move forward? Like, what kind of sign would we need to make a change in this world, to actually believe and to take a step, and to go for it, to listen to those messages and to listen to spirit? And one of us had said an earthquake, and then we had this earthquake the next day. And so people were shaken up a little bit. Obviously, it wasn't very big, but in Maine, it's pretty unusual to feel a rumble like that here. So everyone was on high alert, and they go in, and so everybody in the studio is like, "Jaclyn, what's going on? It's 2012, it's the end of the world, and what is going on with this earthquake?" And then Tina's like, "Yeah, what is the deal with that?" She's like, "That was right at my house." and and so I was like, "Okay, that's a sign. We all have to go to the speak. You all have to be there." And so I remember going to that speak. It was October, the end of October. I think it was October 30th in 2012. And so there's the earthquake, and then right before the speak, we had this incredible storm. I mean, the trees are being ripped out of the ground. There was the wind and the rain. It hit the whole East Coast. and caused a lot of damage. And, it was kind of devastating for people more down south. In Maine, there was just like so much wind. It was incredible. And then as soon as that storm calmed, then it was time for the speak. So we just like finished the storm, and then we all gather, and the energy was just so like all over the place, because there was this talk about the end of the world in 2012 and the end of the Mayan calendar, and then there was an earthquake and the storm. So everybody was just on edge, and they come in, and then so I'm in there. I have my crystal bowls and have this like kind of assumption that being spiritual is just like sitting and meditating and playing my bowls. But we were asked to keep the energy up, and so I'm sitting there with my bowls ready to play, and then in comes Teana. Woo! And she brings all the energy in, a whole bunch of people with her. And since then, Teana continues to carry the star teachings. She brings that energy wherever she goes. She travels. She goes out of her way to bring this energy all over, from North Carolina to Washington State and up to Maine. So tonight I would like to welcome one of the star teachers, and just an amazing human being and a beacon of light for this planet. Teana, welcome.
Thank you, Jaclyn. Thank you. Thank you. That's such a great story. A little preface to before you checked out the Craigslist ad at that studio. It was nearing Earth Day, and I was asking for a native teacher to come and tell some stories for our Earth Day celebration at the studio. And so I did some research, and I contacted a handful of different tribes, and people would lead me to somebody else and to somebody else and somebody else. And I couldn't get anybody to come and offer any kind of stories. And so I didn't understand at that time what that was about, but I was asking out loud, and I was taking a step in the direction to try to make that happen. And then suddenly you show up at the studio, and the breadcrumbs from you kind of lead to the native teacher that's a storyteller that I had been asking for the Earth Day celebration. I didn't realize that storyteller would change my whole entire life and change the way that I walk on this planet. And the stories are really potent and simple and pretty amazing. So that's kind of, I think, why so randomly you checked out Craigslist, because I had been asking for that teacher to show up. So I guess it was time for our journey together to go find that teacher. So thank you for leading that direction, Jaclyn.
Anytime.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. So it didn't, I remember when you were talking about the teas and talking about this teacher, and you were very adamant about all of us coming to listen, because the information was so vital, and because you had found yourself many of your own breadcrumbs or validation through all of the other training that you had done. And I had so much respect for you, because you're somebody that gets off your seat and steps in the direction to find the research and find the information. So, when you said that you were going to stick around that year because there was a teacher that needed to, that I don't know, the information, and you felt like you were needed here. I think that was the wording that you used. And so as we went to that first speak, I realized that the stories that were being told were woven so deeply into everyday life. The stories about the woodpecker or the bear weren't necessarily really about that. About how we should be walking on the earth. These star teachings are I guess maybe a reintroduction, right, to the way the loop of nature is already formed. So for us to step back into that loop. But these teas, I realized very quickly, are so potent, and I think what people have been craving, the whole idea of kindness, and being open to new people that you wouldn't necessarily talk to. Yeah, and I think what you discussed about the welcome that you received when you entered some stranger's home, for you didn't even know what to expect, but the welcome that you got was genuine, it was authentic. And so I think that's what people need, that's what we're looking for, right? That connection. And I recognize that it was time, well, yeah, that speak in 2012 was just so powerful, when we all came together, we had, whoa, sorry about that. We came together and we had so much fun. Woo, Spirit playing a little joke to lighten it up, I guess. Yeah, we had so much fun, and enjoying each other's company, and being in the resonance of kindness, compassion, and happiness, and carrying that with us forward in our everyday lives. And it was so simple and so beautiful. And I knew that we needed to share this. They kept asking about sharing the information. And part of the teachings talks about 7 million, right? 7 million looking in the same direction. And as we look in the same direction, I know there's not even, not even one person that, I'm sorry, I'm being distracted out here. I said I was outside. So 7 million looking in one direction. And we're not going to certainly find 7 million people in Maine. And so the suggestion was made to share. And when I started to recognize the, the energies, when I started to recognize the way that life has woven its web in my eyes through my perception, that I had sought out previously a Native teacher when I lived close to Cherokee, North Carolina, 20 years previous. And so I recognized again the breadcrumbs and the connection. And Jaclyn and I hopped in the car once I convinced her that North Carolina was our place, that we had to go there. And she was all about it. Let's go to North Carolina. So we hopped in my little tiny Kia Soul. We took the Star Soul, right? Star Soul down to North Carolina, and we brought tea with us. And there was one of the teachings that that David had been speaking about, finding the ancient elder and finding the iron bird. And as we drove to North Carolina, we kept seeing signs for Iron Duff and Iron Works and Irondale. Everything was iron. And I said, Jaclyn, I bet you the iron bird's down here. Yes. And so we did some tea. We didn't know what the heck an iron bird was. We didn't know what we were looking for, but we knew that the community again wanted and craved the information that was being shared. They wanted more. And so Jaclyn and I left, and was very interesting after we left that my mother called me shortly, because we had gone to and stayed with my mother. She was living in North Carolina at the time. So my mother called me shortly after, and she said, So I have this friend that says that on her property there's a portal for the star people. And she said, weren't you just here with the star people? And I said, oh my Lord, I was just there with the star people. That's so crazy. So we're we're laughing about that. And so I hang up the phone with my mother, and I don't even get my hand off of the phone, and it's ringing. And it was Jaclyn. And I pick up the phone, and Jaclyn says, I just got off the phone with David, and he says we should go back to North Carolina. And I said, that's interesting because I just got off the phone with my mom, and there's a portal for the star people. And so off we went. We made another trip to North Carolina, and we visited a handful of sites. And one of the sites was the biodome. And it's really interesting how the biodome wove into my story 20 years ago when I lived in North Carolina. And again, following breadcrumbs leads me right back to that spot. And so now the biodome in North Carolina is one of the technologies that Star Teachings is starting to work on and work with. So it's been really interesting how teas have been the bridge to communities, the kindness being the bridge to one another, and the way that, I don't know, spirit has woven it out. Like I say it all the time, you can't make this up. The way that it weaves itself, you can't make it up. And it's proven over and over again that the information is spirit driven. The information comes from the stars, and it's woven into everything that we do, that we say, that we experience. So I find learning a new dance is what the teas have taught me. The information has taught me a new dance, and a new prescription lens, if you will, a new way to see the world. So so that's my part of the story, the way that truly listening and being attuned to the voice in our head, right, that we kind of discount all the time, and we think it's silly. I use this as an example. I was driving one day, and that voice in my head, I drove by the gas station, and it was like $2 and something, whatever it was, and I needed gas, but I didn't feel like stopping in that moment. But Spirit said to me, that voice in my head said, you better stop for gas now. You really should. I don't have time for that, right? So I keep going, I get up the road, there's another gas station, and it's 20 cents more than it was the other place. So I'm like, well, I'm not stopping now. I keep going down the street, and it's even more expensive. And as I climb the mountain, it's getting more and more expensive. And I'm like, darn it, I should have listened and stopped and got the gas back there when it was $2.20. But, I don't know. It's helped me to listen a little bit deeper, I guess. Yeah. Thank you, Jaclyn.
Thank you, Teana Bird.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. I remember, those early teas in Maine, and we kept meeting in a small living room, and we didn't even know what tea was, but we kept going. And I remember the energy was so intense. We always had a white candle going in the middle, and some of those teas, like, they grew. They were originally 8 people, and then 12, and then 16, and then we're trying to cram 60 people in one tiny living room, and they're overflowing out into the kitchen and up the stairs, and then I think I was under the table and one of them, like, trying to see through the wall what was going on. But the energy was so palpable and so strong that, like, I remember the candles just burning down so quick, and we just, like, kept lighting them, and they just burn right down. And so we're just, like, building that energy together as community. And then, David was giving us suggestions to to go out and do 3 acts of kindness. In one moment, we're talking about portals and between rainbows and what happens after you die, and multi-dimensional selves. And then the spiritual homework that we had was to go out and do 3 acts of kindness, to sit with a candle in a dark room, just a white candle, or invite yourself over to somebody's home for dinner. So at first I kind of disregarded those suggestions because I wanted like the portals and the multi-dimensional whatever I was looking for. And then listening to the community and those teas we would share, and the teas are a place for the voice of the community. So we go around and each share, and and is that coffee? Are you having coffee?
It's my my family. I'm dueling
out there.
Yes, I'm trying.
So anyways, people are sharing these stories, and they're like, talking about what incredible experiences they've had with these acts of kindness. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm missing out. I've been going and just trying to absorb some vibration and thinking that was going to enlighten me. And it took me a little while to realize, like, oh, so we go and there's this energy that we build together, but then to yeah, this is open. You can have tea, coffee.
Sorry.
So, I was like just going and like sucking up this energy, and then it would kind of fizzle after a couple days. And then I started realizing that those practices, those suggestions, were ways to keep that energy going within ourselves and to share it with the community. And we didn't know what tea was then. It was just like tea time, but it was a pretty intense tea. So we had those practices, and I remember when there was a ceremony of 20 that was suggested. So we'd take a $20 bill, go exchange it for 21s, and then go give those away. And that was the ceremony of 20. So I had been practicing that, and seeing who I could give it to, and who would accept it and who wouldn't, who would run away. And I remember thinking it was more of a challenge than I thought it would be. And just standing out on the porch of a place one day, and just standing there, and then out of nowhere this tornado comes through and all these dollar bills come flying at me, and then this woman's laughing and running off, and then I realized it was Teana bird, and she was practicing the same thing, but she had a creative twist on how to deliver those dollars, which really lit me up. And it just made me realize like how unique our connections are, how unique each one of us are, how unique our light is. And when we share that with each other, it's always in a different way. So practicing that ceremony of 20, every interaction is never going to be the same. You're never going to have that same interaction again, even with the same person. So Teana, I am curious if you want to share a little bit more about, you talked a lot about the breadcrumbs and like learning to listen to spirit, learning to listen to that voice. Can you share a little bit more about what you've learned or discovered in teas or the community that has strengthened that?
So I think hearing other people's stories, because it seems valid straight across the board once people really start to what I call live in the teachings, live within those technologies. They start to see the same kind of things. So it's almost like unlocking pieces. So it might be true or whatever in my own world, in my own life. But most importantly for me is watching the information light other people up. I think it's almost like the best reward to watch other people get quenched by the information, watch them light up themselves and start to walk in a different way and start to listen themselves to the voice, start to follow the breadcrumbs themselves. But to realize, I guess maybe in a more mindful way of what we're doing, because only we know our life story. Only we know our life story. Clink. Can we do cheers?
I don't know where. Oh yeah.
That was great. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So, because only we know our life story, only we know when a breadcrumb is left for us by spirit, because we have a message about whatever that is. So I think the validation through watching other people take the steps and come alive in a different way and break out of their shell, and starting to discover that those subtle suggestions are almost like homework, and that the homework is the integration of the information. Like you, a lot of times, David would say, or the teacher, whoever was speaking, would talk about writing a letter to somebody that you haven't spoken to in a long time, and about how that letter was almost like a prayer, right? Because you're sitting with the thoughts of that person, and hopefully they're good thoughts if you're writing a letter to that person. But to sit with the pleasant thoughts of that person, and to that practice is actually a prayer for that person. And it's a lost art. People don't do that anymore. We're on our thumb. We're talking with our thumbs. Hi, nice to see you today. Yeah. So just that simple idea of writing a letter and creating that to be a prayer for someone. I ignored it, and I ignored it, and I ignored it, and I kept hearing it at all the teas I was going to, and I've got 6 years worth of notebooks, and that suggestion is probably in a handful of the notebooks. But it's interesting that I didn't hear the suggestion or the information until I was really ready to use it and implement it, because I was struggling with the breakup of a friendship for a long time, and I needed to know how do I get past that? How do I move through that? And I kept asking out loud and asking for ways for that to show itself. And every time I would go to a tea, like I said, I would hear that information kind of in different ways. And when I finally realized that was like a little breadcrumb for me, that was my message, my information, and took that and made it my own, and was able to sit and write that letter and move on from that and let that go. So those are some really vital pieces, I think, learning and understanding that the homework is there for a reason, and implementing it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thanks for.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just go back and talk a little bit about the teas for anybody who's watching that might not know the history or what they are. So in 2012, we were talking about these circles, these gatherings, and David would come in and he would speak, and he kept saying, "This isn't about me," and tea is about turning me to we. And we kept saying that, and we're like, we should make bumper stickers and t-shirts, and but I don't think we really got it. We got like the concept of it, but it took a while to and we're still working on it. Like, how do you turn me to we? And so we kept going to these gatherings, these circles, and they got bigger and bigger. And we'd have speaks that were more a lecture style. And so I'm just gonna, I think, mute you for a sec, Teana. There. So these gatherings were growing, and we kept asking, what can we do next? Like, what do we do? So the first thing was that we had to listen. We had to be open. We were invited to come and listen with an open mind, to clean the beeswax out of our ears, and just to be open to listening. That was the first step, to be able to be together. So despite our differences in beliefs, or where we're coming from, that we could just sit together and have tea together. That is a basic understanding, or a basic thing. Like, how do we get along together as humans? And so we continued to do the practices. There's a large number of people actually implementing them in the community and sharing, and going out to Portland and wherever they went to practice and to give these teachings away. And in that sense, it allowed David to continue teaching and to continue sharing. So it grew and grew. We had friends from Boston come up, and then we went down to Boston for speaks and teas. And eventually, in May of 2013, when we had been asking what is the next step, there was a message that came, and it was that the teas would be turned over to the community. So it wouldn't be up to David anymore. He may come to one of the teas that we were having, but it was suggested we do 21 teas every lunar cycle for 6 months. And so it was kind of all just handed over to us. And there were 7 or 8 people maybe that had been in the teas long enough and were ready to start holding and conducting those teas. So we were kind of thrown into it and had to figure it out. We set them up. We were good at that part we'd been doing. But to get into a circle, and then all of a sudden we're sitting in a circle together, like, well, what is the tea? How do we do this? What are we doing? And I remember Bill Wentworth. He's one of our amazing teachers. He came into my first tea, and he's, you got to teach, Jaclyn. I'm like, yeah, but we're turning me to we. So it's not just like me spewing out words and you're going to get it and go home and do something with it. This is about building this energy together, and there's something beyond just that one person sharing. So we went through practicing teas, and over 6 months we learned, and we kept asking David, what are we doing? What is tea? How do we do it? And he said, just keep doing it. So through the experience of it, that's how we learned it. And that's what I've learned a lot with the Star teachings. It's not just like, here's a book and you study it and it's a concept, and then you've got it. You've got to actually do those actions. You've got to do those little bits to like really embody it. So over time, as we practice more and more and do more and more, then more and more information can come to us. So the teas we learned have come as a translation from the Copper Scrolls. The Copper Scrolls are, they've been dated 20,000 years, and the instructions are in the Copper Scrolls of how to do teas. So this isn't a new thing. It's just something that we haven't done in this way before. So it takes a little while to understand and to practice. And I've heard David talk about the research that he's been doing for over, I don't even know how long. I think in the 70s he was up on top of mountains and trying to catch signals from space, radio signals, and decoding those and deciphering those, and that all points to the teas. That's how the translation for the teas has come. So through these radio signals, through the Copper Scrolls, and through the messages from Spirit, and then it's up to the community, if we want them, to actually put them together to understand how to do it, and to be in that circle. So that's where it came from, but it helps to build community. It gives a way for each person in the community to share their voice. So it's not just one person speaking, it's all of us. And in that way, we get to hear like the collective voice of the community. And, in each location where the teas have gone, the information that's come through those communities is different. So in North Carolina, there's the biodome that Teana mentioned, the Biodome Project, and the Star Mountain, and some of the other locations. There's other things that come through those teas, the bigger messages. So we have I'll put mute first. One second. In Canada, they have a whole different message that comes through that's specific for that community or that location, that area. In Arizona, the message of a Star Lodge there came through, and some other pieces. So wherever we go, it's dependent on the energy of the land and the earth there, but more importantly, it's the people. And I just wondered, Teana, if you had a way that you would describe tea, like what is tea? What are we talking about here?
Oh, geez. So, T, time, earth, air, and space. So, coming together in circle is a technology, and the way that when the facilitators sitting in the circle are in the teachings and in the resonance of kindness, compassion, and happiness, it creates almost a vortex in that circle to allow more information, I guess, to be downloaded, for lack of a better term. What I've come to learn is our DNA is what we carry from our past, from our history, from our ancestors, and our DNA is a code, and these codes can be unlocked through this technology, through being in community, and through sharing this technology with each other. And so this is how the information comes forth, and this is why every place we do a tea, every region is different, and different information comes forward because it's different DNA sitting in that vortex, being unlocked and sharing their messages, sharing their magic, sharing their piece of the puzzle, because we all hold a piece. We're a collective. So each one of us holds something so vital to the bigger picture. And so that's been my understanding of the tea and how the information comes forward, and that there's no hierarchy. We're all teachers, we're all students, and we've all had experiences. We've all had a life path that has brought lots of teaching moments, and we can help others through those stories. So that's what I've come to learn about the teas and what we're doing.
Yeah.
But it's hard sometimes, though, isn't it, to put, I think one of the teachers said it so eloquently, it's hard to put things that are of spirit into human language, right? Because spirit is fluid and ethereal and has movement like air, and human language is like concrete and boxy and static. And so it's hard sometimes to, and I think this is something we struggled around really early in the community, building community, is creating language around what tea is, because we didn't know, and we didn't know how to put the right words and the right verbiage together to open or unlock people's curiosity. But, over 6 years, we've kind of learned collectively what works best in that way.
Yeah, yeah, the language part is very challenging. And,
Mm.
even I hear the words, I hear the teachings, and I might hear one word a little bit differently. I might hear coffee, perhaps.
I was going to say that.
And that may be an acronym.
Right.
That's an acronym.
Right.
But um, one of the quotes that I see a lot in the STAR teachings is that kindness is a language that everyone can understand. So just, kindness, if we look at it as a word, it is just, that one word. But kindness as the vibration is a whole language.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the T's, we're sitting there in the resonance of kindness. And so much more information can flow through that than just the English word, just saying it. Um, so we have about, I don't know, 15 minutes or so left. Teana, I wondered if you had any stories you wanted to share. What's a story? I mean, we're in the middle of a story, but
It is a story. We're creating it right now. Absolutely. Let me think. Mm-mm-mm. So, I actually told this story today to someone about at one point in STAR teachings, I remember at T's, we were talking about talking to somebody you wouldn't ordinarily talk to, stepping out of your comfort zone to have a conversation with somebody that in the past maybe you would have a judgment about for whatever reason. So I had gone to a Red Sox game at Fenway in Boston, and we spent the night in Boston, and the next morning we woke up, and before we got on the road to go back home, we went to a Dunkin' Donuts, and that place was packed full of people. The line was snaked back and forth all the way out the door. Not a table to be had for sitting or anything, but we get through the line, we get our coffee and our muffin or whatever, and there's one table left. And excuse me, as we approach the table, there's an old man sitting at the table beside it, and he starts to yell at us. He says, "Don't you read that newspaper? Don't you read that newspaper on the table?" He said, "There's nothing but bad news in there." And I was like, okay, well, thank you for the information. And he must have been hard of hearing because he was talking to us and he was really, really loud. And he was talking about, he says, back in my day, he says, I would do my paper in school and I would bring it to my teacher. And my teacher would say, "Now, Fred, that was great, but I think you can do better." And he said, "Guess what? I went back to my chair and I did better." He said, "Teachers these days, they don't care. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a damn. This place is going to hell in a handbasket." And he's yelling. He's talking really loud. And he says, watch this. And he stands up and he starts yelling, "Excuse me. Excuse me." Nobody's paying attention to him. And he points to the line that's snaking back and forth almost out the door. He says, "Ladies before gentlemen. Ladies before gentlemen. See, nobody cares. Nobody cares." And now I'm noticing the people around me start to give me the hairy eyeball. Like, will you stop talking to him? Stop encouraging him to talk because he's really annoying. Like, I can read what they're trying to tell me with their eyeballs. And so I'm engaging him in conversation even more because he's somebody that I might not ordinarily talk to had I not had the understanding about that. I normally would have taken the cues, the social cues from the other people around me telling me to shut him up, and I would have ignored him, but I didn't. And I engaged him deeper into conversation. And I said, "Fred, what do you do for work?" He says, "Well, I'm long retired." He said, "But I used to work for NASA." "What? NASA?" "Yeah, I worked for NASA." I said, "Wow, Fred, that's amazing. I worked for NASA for 38 years. I said, "What was the greatest thing about working for NASA?" He says, "Well, let me tell you, in the summertime, when those young kids would come up for the space camp and they'd be so excited and they'd had so much vibrant um, you know, knowledge, sponges for knowledge. That's what he used, the word sponges. And he was so excited and he was lit up by telling me about all of these children that he got to share his passion for NASA with these young children. And by the time the conversation was ending, all of those same people that were giving me hairy eyeballs, they were laughing and they were enjoying Fred's stories. He was lighting them up through his stories. So, I think that's one of my favorite stories about Fred and the Dunkin' Donuts and talking to people you wouldn't ordinarily talk to. And just being there in a mindful way for people. He just wanted to be heard. And what a great story I have to tell now because of it. Good old Fred.
Good old Fred. Thank you, Fred.
Good old Fred. What about you, Jaclyn? Do you have a quick story?
I haven't been prepared. I didn't know you would ask.
What? Isn't that funny how that works?
Yeah.
Preparation,
communication going both ways.
Yes. Appreciation.
Yeah. There's so many stories, like, over the last 6 years there, when you go out of your way, when you take a different path, like the suggestion is, or do the 3 acts of kindness, you're actually like creating these new stories every time. I think I've shared a few before. What would be a really good one? I think this one is just kind of simple and and silly a little bit. So going back to 2012, when it was going to be the end of the world and everyone was preparing. It was December 21st, 2012, and we were having the 7th speak of 7 that happened in 2012. So those are the first 7 times that David spoke publicly sharing these teachings. And we were asked to invite people to the event, and this gave us the opportunity to practice the kindness and compassion, and to invite people to this thing that we didn't really know what it was going to be. It was an event. We had some of the elders coming down from the north to share for the very first time, and we had a few speakers lined up who had been in the Star Teachings for a number of years, working with David in different ways, through Shokai, and some other ways. But I remember getting together with another woman from the community, and we're like, how are we going to invite everybody? And we're like, well, of course we'd have flyers. Like, flyers were the thing. We did the Facebook thing, but the flyers gave us that like interaction, because on Facebook it's easy to be like, invite, and then it's easy to be like, no thanks, no thanks. And so it's not like really that personal. You don't have that interaction. It's just like information. And so we're like, well, let's have fun with this. Let's really have fun and see how many people we can interact with. So we printed out the flyers. I went into Portland, and we were around Monument Square in Portland, Maine. And of course I brought my hula hoop, because that is always just fun. I thought I'd just hula hoop and hand out flyers. And so while I was there, like, I'm a pretty shy person. I never used to really go too far out of my way to say hello to anybody, but these flyers and this event was important to me enough that it got me interacting with more people than I normally would. So being awkward and all in my interactions, I brought the hula hoop as like a safety thing, because you make people laugh, then you can interact about something. And we went around. Our idea was to hang up the flyers in the local businesses, so we were asking if we could do that. But the most fun I had was just meeting people on the street and inviting them, just saying, hey, this is going on, and would you like to come? It's free and open, and there's going to be a marimba band. We're going to dance and celebrate. And I remember having the hula hoop and hula hooping, and having other people would come up and ask if they could use it, and so they'd try, and then I started going up to people and asking if they wanted to try, and some people were like, "Oh no, I can't do that," and oh no, I can't touch that thing, and I'm like, well, you could do this, and like doing like the jump rope thing with it, like there's no rules, it's a hula hoop. So it really, like, it got a whole crowd of people around us, just playing with this silly hula hoop. So a whole bunch of people that I've never met, that never talked to each other before, we're all just, gathered around this this one object, hula hoop. And I was asking if this one woman, she was kind of hooping and it would go a little bit and then drop. And I said, "Oh, are you a teacher?" And she said, No, I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to hula hoop." And I said, "That's not what I asked. Are you a teacher?" And because we had been learning in the Star Teachings that everybody's a teacher. So just in the kindness of how we are, our experience up to our that point in our life at that time, you have teachings to share, but we don't recognize those. And so the woman, she was still holding the hula hoop, and I said, "Well, what else can you do with that hula hoop?" And so she started doing like this jump rope thing with it, and I was like, "Oh, how do you do that?" And then she starts, "Oh, you hold on to it like this, and then you flip it around." And I was like, "See, you are a teacher." And I was doing it, hopping around, and it's like this really silly, simple thing, but we can really change the energy of a whole entire place just based on what we're doing, just being open to play. I think sharing your kindness, sharing your light, sharing what lights you up, and even if like you're not the best at something, like you still are a teacher no matter what. So we can teach each other about our kindnesses, and just being together is, I don't know why it's so hard. Really.
So true.
Yeah.
It's true.
But yeah, I love those, just like those moments where it's like a kindness is felt, and then it's like people are drawn to that, and they're curious, and they're like, "What is going on?" These people are having fun. What's going on? So, my hope is that we can continue to do that wherever we go. And I know Teana Bird is one of those people. I remember seeing a video on Facebook on one of the tea travels, and Tina's dancing in the airport. I think there's the piano and just dancing around and watching. And some people are like, "What's going on?" And other people are joining in. So I think, doing those, going out of your way and not being afraid, and just letting that light out, letting that expression out, is a kindness to the people around. What do you think, Teana?
I think you're right. You're onto something. By George, I think you've got it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jaclyn. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you, Teana. It's good to have tea and coffee together. And a nice chat. Yeah, I'd like to just invite people further, if you're watching and you're interested in connecting with community. Teana is down in the southeastern United States. Teana, is there a way people can connect with the community if they're in that region?
Yeah, absolutely. I created a group called the Southeastern Tea Group or something like that.
Navigators.
Navigators. That's right. The Navigators. Go Navigator. Southeastern Tea. Yeah, Navigator. So you can connect with that group. It's an open group on Facebook, and you can feel free to also send a friend request to Teana Ironbird, and Teana is Tea, like tea, nah, Teana Ironbird on Facebook, and I'd be happy to connect in that way.
Awesome. Thank you, Teana.
Thank you.
And there's also a virtual tea on
Yes.
Facebook. So
You have to be added though? Do you have to be added to virtual tea?
I think so. So
Okay.
you may need to have a friend that's in the group, but you can send a message to starteachingsociety@gmail.com. That's star StarTeachingsSociety, I think, at gmail.com. And that that if you send a message there, then one of our volunteers will get back to you. So if you want to join virtual tea, you can send a message there and we'll get you connected. We have a Star Teachings Facebook page, facebook.com/Star Teachings with an S on the end. And we would like to invite you this Monday, if you are participating in the teas in any way or would like to be an active participant in the teas, whether you're going, hosting, conducting, setting up teas, or just interested. We are going to be having a conference call with David Ouillette Sanipass. I believe the time is 8 p.m. Eastern, and that will be posted on the Star Teachings Facebook page and the events. So please join us there. And we will be, call Monday night. And then next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we'll be on this webinar again. And this is open to anyone. So you can call in with your phone, computer, and we try to live stream on Facebook on our Star Teachings page. And also we have another page that's more dedicated to the technologies of Star Teachings, and that's at Distant Ancient Echoes. So we post some information there as well. So join us next Thursday if you can. David will be back sharing more stories of the Star Teaching. So I want to thank you, Teana, and thank you everyone for showing up. Let's write the story that we want to write here.
Grab your pen.
Grab your pen. Get off your seats.
Get off your seat. Step in the direction. Excellent. Thank you, Jaclyn. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Till next time.